presentation is a brief look at some of the digital aspects of my methodology for my PhD in progress at the moment. I'm researching the transmission and innovation of faience and glass technologies from Egypt, the Near East, and the Aegean to Cyprus in the Late Bronze Age. Cypriot society in the Late Bronze Age was radically and rapidly transformed from dispersed agro-pastoral communities to a very stratified industrial urban communities with international interests. We don't fully understand all the forces that led to those changes. Scholars have focused greatly on the development of the copper that came out of the Late Bronze Age Cyprus Troodos area, but it doesn't really explain everything that was happening in Cyprus, and I want to explore that through looking at identity and particularly how social, political and economic entities formed, as we can see through the use of luxury products like glass and faience. Now, this is where you're going to have to bear with me. My videos aren't playing inside, so we have to play them separately. The digital reintegration of globally dispersed collections emerged as a possibility as I began collecting data for my PhD thesis. My research journey began with collecting object data from excavation reports and plotting out distributions of glass and faience on the map of Cyprus. I was very fortunate to make contact with the team at the Monash Immersive Visualization Platform, who helped me generate a 3D map of Late Bronze Age Cyprus, visualising those distributions of finds to analyse how those important luxury materials moved around Cyprus in relation to the landscape and particularly to the riverscapes. It also allowed me to demonstrate the connectedness of sites and the mobility of people and objects in the cave 3D platform, which is available at Monash University. Research into glass and faience objects from Cyprus in the Late Bronze Age involves more than just digging into the distant past. It also concerns the more recent past of the objects and the archaeological and museological practice. Many of these objects came to light in excavations undertaken in the early part of the last century. And 100 years ago, the scientific method was in its infancy in archaeology. Practices were still a bit loose and quite colourful, and many important aspects of archaeological context were lost due to incomplete and not entirely accurate reporting. Further, many of those objects were excavated, packed into crates and sent to the homes of foreign excavators without ever being seen by most Cypriots. So, this is when the next stage of my data collection commenced. Scanner, I headed to the great museums of England and Sweden and Cyprus to examine and scan the glass and faience objects from Late Bronze Age Cyprus. The Mare Frome is an Arduino-based consumer class scanner with an automated turntable. It simultaneously takes a laser scan to build an object mesh and uses RGB photogrammetry to create a texture layer with 0.25mm resolution. It simultaneously takes a laser scan to build an object mesh. It comes with easy-to-use cleaning and editing software, which I produced OBJs, JPEGs and MTL files, which can be uploaded into all kinds of 3D visualizing software. It also provides me with accurate measuring but I still need to use a Munsell chart to analyse colour. There's no digital equivalent to the human eye for understanding colour yet. My main objective was to create these 3D images to undertake 3D morphometric analysis to identify common manufacturing techniques and unique workshop production signatures such as handle and spout designs, base application types, execution of decorative motifs, firing and scraping marks. That's right. In its current form, I can examine my data simultaneously using M-Cube software in the Monash Cave platform. So as you can see, I can put up all my 3D objects in a space. It's about 10 metres circle and it has floor-to-ceiling 3D screens. And we can wear 3D glasses and see all of these objects in 3D and compare them together rather than just looking at them one at a time, which helps a lot with making analysis of things like just putting up all the objects from one side, like encomi, and just seeing those, or just putting up all the pomegranate-shaped vessels, no matter where they came from, to see if they're all the same. Those kinds of comparisons are really important. Also looking at just the objects that come from funerary sites, to see if you can see trends in funerary-style objects that are different to the sorts that we find in urban environments. And I can look at them all in different orientations and do all sorts of tricky things with it, which is really good. As I produced these 3D images, I began to see their potential for wider uses. Because the scanner produces an image on the screen of my laptop when I'm working in the museums, I used to get all these people coming past, curators, museum staff, visiting scholars, and they'd be quite mesmerised. They'd just sit there and watch the image building on the screen as it scanned. And it opened up a lot of dialogue about collaborative opportunities and making the material available for the public, which is something that's really important, particularly this cypriot material. So much of it's in storage, so even if cypriots have the wherewithal to go overseas and see their collections in foreign museums, they won't see many of these things because they're stored. So I then was able to start a discussion with the Cyprus Institute for hosting a virtual collection like a virtual museum that could be viewed not on a big platform like this one in Australia, which is wonderful, but towards that now, which is really fantastic. So moving forward with my research itself, having created this digital catalogue, I'm now investigating the trade and display of glass to identify its value and its uses and compare Cypriot finds, and particularly their technologies, with those of Egypt, the Levant, the Aegean and mainland Greece, to eliminate the role of glass ingots in the network. And I'm also looking at industries and workshops. There's been quite a lot of great work done in Egypt and in Greece about what glass and faience manufacturing sites looked like and what sort of evidence to find. And that's missing from the Cypriot story. So now I'm trying to build a picture of how workshops looked, what kinds of kilns were common for those kinds of workshops, and see if we can identify them in Cyprus. There are a whole lot of challenges in looking at glass and faience from Cyprus. In the 14th and 13th centuries, the development of an international style was an intercultural expression of super-regional elite powers. That interpenetration of international and indigenous traditions in the creation of luxury objects obscures the origins of many of those objects manufactured. There's also distribution patterns a bit skewed in Cyprus, particularly the survival of funerary sites over sites of settlement and urban sites. So it makes it more complex if it's only funerary sites that are surviving, and that's where most of the material comes from. that doesn't always help us understand where it was manufactured. And finally, there's issues with provenance testing. There's been quite a bit of extensive work done on Egyptian and Greek, and some work on material testing from the Levant about the origins of glass, particularly trace element analysis that can show where the blues come from, whether they're generated by copper or whether they're cobalt glasses, which help identify where they came from. In Cyprus, this hasn't happened. There hasn't been much testing of cypriot materials. Part of this is that it's a destructive form of testing often to do those analyses. But secondly, the survival rate of particularly faience, the glaze, deteriorates in the damp grounds. The preservation is not like nice dry Egyptian preservation. And because of that deterioration in the glazes, particularly the alkalis, it's very difficult to work out where they came from. Secondly, we know they were trading glass. Raw glass ingots were found on the Bullabur, and we have records in the Amana letters talking about the trade of glass ingots. So even if we did test glass objects in Cyprus, it still would only tell us where the raw glass was made, as opposed to whether the object was manufactured in Cyprus. So I really need a multi-pronged approach to this project, and digitizing and trying to identify signatures of workshops is a big part of that. So just a few preliminary finds, and they're very preliminary. Questions of the general understanding of cypriot glass and faience as imported are perhaps not quite accurate. The local cypriot production of glass and faience may be more significant in both quantity and quality than previously considered. Some key object types, like the pomegranate vessels, the spotted stirrup jars, and some of the petal bowls, are starting to show us that there's big distributions of these particularly decorated objects in Cyprus, and they're not seen anywhere else that are the same. So there was an industry there. It's now about tracking it down. Manufacturing techniques varied over time, certainly, but also the technical traditions seem to influence different parts of Cyprus. So there are certain parts of Cyprus that definitely take on Egyptian technologies, both for making glazes and for producing of particular types of objects. Others had really strong connections with places like Ugarit and the technologies that had developed there. And then maybe a little bit of influence coming from Minnow and Crete in the faience, but still unravelling that. That one didn't play. So one of the things that's been really fantastic recently is the development of collaborative opportunities to work with other scholars by desktop units like this one. It's called Looking Glass. It's about this big and it sits on your desk. And I can send object data to friends overseas and they can look at it in 3D using a desktop unit like this, which is great. And the other project is working on a virtual museum exhibition of this material, which I would like to release to the public when my thesis is finished.